My name is Justin, and I am a son of God and an addict, and the host of the RECO12 speaker meeting. Thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I am sober, one day at a time, since June 19th, 2015, and for that, I am beyond grateful. Welcome to RECO12. We are an organization whose addictions include alcohol, drugs, lust, and sex, food, and gambling, just to name a few. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to learn the similarities of addiction and to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom webinar each Friday at noon Central Time for 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of the speaker for another 20 to 25 minutes. If you are hearing this meeting in recorded podcast form and would like to participate as a live audience member in the future, please go to www.RECO12, that's RECO12.com, and submit your email address there and learn more about what we do so that you can receive the weekly invitations that we send out. RECO12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our 12th step in this manner. We gratefully accept contributions to help cover the cost of the Zoom platform, podcast platform, web hosting, and administrative costs. To contribute, you can go to RECO12.com/support, or you can click the link to PayPal that will be in the chat of the live meeting and also in the show notes of the podcast. When you contribute, please specify the meeting number. This is meeting number 59. Last week's meeting was with Nick P., and he spoke passionately about the missing piece of recovery. If you missed hearing that very good meeting or any other meeting we have done, you can listen to them in podcast form on any podcast platform that you use. Or you can go to the website, the RECO12 website, and find it there under the link podcast. One more word about our speakers before we introduce today's speaker. When we line up a speaker for a meeting, we ask them to seek guidance on what and how to present so that they can reflect the light that they have been given. That light will inspire hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now, today's meeting will be slightly different than normal. One, because our speaker, Michael Brody-Waite, has elected to surrender his anonymity. And two, because this is actually our second run with Michael. Back in March, on March 5th, he was a speaker on RECO12. And immediately after the meeting, I realized I never hit record. And now I'm checking once again to make sure that we're recording, and we are. And his talk back then was amazing. And those who were there live at the time can attest to that. Now, those here live, as well as those who listen to this in podcast format, can attest to it being a great topic and a great speaker. Now, let's introduce our guest speaker for today, whose topic will be the benefits of living like a drug addict. And here's a little background on Michael. At the age of 23, Michael Brody-Waite was a full-blown drug addict. Every day, he drank a fifth of vodka and a 12-pack of beer. He smoked 2 packs of cigarettes and more weed than any human should. And he did whatever other drugs he could get his hands on. He'd been kicked out of college, fired from his job, and evicted from his apartment. He had no money and no home and was throwing up blood and believed he would be dead before his 30th birthday. Then on September 1st, 2002, after running out of options and fearing death, he checked into rehab, entered recovery, and has been transforming himself every day since. Now, today, Michael is on a mission to teach individuals, organizations, and communities how to lead themselves by living mask-free. And in his personal time, he is focused on being the best husband, father, and recovering addict he can be. Take it away, Michael. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Justin. So, and you mentioned I help people live and lead mask-free. So I kind of want to actually start there. Masks have a lot of different connotations these days. But when I went to rehab back in 2002, they slapped 2 cardboard masks down in front of me. Obviously well before a pandemic. And they said, we want you to use like magazine cutouts and clips and pictures to decorate. One to make look like the person that you try to show the world, and the other to look like the person that you think that you're hiding. And so the one that I showed the world had like BMWs and nice houses and athletes and George Clooney back when he was young and hot, like before, not now. And I was trying to look good. And the other one was a sad, lonely little boy who didn't feel comfortable in his own skin, who felt like when they were handing out the instructions on how to deal with life and life's terms that he had been skipped. And so they taught me really early on that as an addict, I was as addicted to hiding myself as I was addicted to getting high. And the thing that I've learned in my recovery is that is not that dissimilar from most people's experiences. Just drug addicts deal with it very differently. And, so today, I go around the world and I have this talk called Great Leaders of Like Drug Addicts. And it's the title of my book, and it's similar to the title of my TED Talk. And the whole notion is that everybody's hiding themselves. We hit ourselves to chase the next hit. But leaders are hiding themselves so that they can get the corner office or the pay bump or the title, or even maybe it's positive. It's like an impact. But I think for me, the message that I try to carry, is, well, I mean, first of all, any addict can get clean. I'm testimony to that. If this addict can do it, anyone can do it. And I've had some really unique experiences. And so I want to get into how the 12 steps became my leadership framework, but just, a little bit more background, I started when I got out of rehab. I checked into a halfway house. I didn't want to, but I was following directions, and I was told that I would have a better chance of staying clean if I did. So I checked into a halfway house, and I had 5 business days to get a job or they were going to kick me out. And I had to go into a job interview, and I talk about this in my book, my TED Talk, but it was at a place called Sam Goody. And if you're older than me, you think that's a record store. If you're my age, you think it's a CD store. And if you're younger than me, you have no idea what the heck I'm talking about. You do not know what it was like to wait for Guns N' Roses, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 at Tower Records at midnight. So the thing is that, I had an interview. And I'll never forget, I called my sponsor and I said, this is the only job that I have an interview for, or they're going to kick me out if I don't get a job. And so I have to get this job, but it has access to the cash register, and I don't have a college degree, and my resume looks like crap because I've been using and I have no work history. So like, what do I tell them so I can kind of dance around the fact that, I just got out of rehab? And he told me, Mike, you have to tell them the truth. And that was really hard for me to stomach. And so I said to him, if I tell them the truth, they won't give me the job. And if I don't get the job, I won't be able to live in the halfway house. And if I don't live in the halfway house, I'll be out on the street and I'll probably use. And if I use, I'll die. And he was like, Mike, I've seen plenty of addicts learn to, and these are the principles that I've kind of used to codify what we learn in the 12 steps. But I've seen plenty of addicts learn how to practice rigorous authenticity, surrender the outcome, and do uncomfortable work and stay clean on the street. But I haven't seen any addict that was incapable of practicing rigorous authenticity, surrendering the outcome, and doing uncomfortable work that was able to stay clean. So this isn't about the job. This is about your freaking life. And, that was like a really significant litmus test. And so, I went in there and I told the manager, that I was an addict, and my reference was my counselor in rehab. And I got the job anyhow. And it really taught me that, hey, in the professional world, which we all have to live in, or most of us do, we're taught to hide ourselves. And I think the addicts are sitting on a unique opportunity. I think that we have a unique system and process for showing our true selves. And we can do that professionally. And actually, while it's really scary, it can help us be really successful. So like, I went on from that experience to spend 8 years going up the corporate ladder at a Fortune 50 company. And I started off as a temporary rep at a kiosk in a mall. And in 8 years, I was a middle manager with 19 direct reports, a $250 million P&L. As a recovering drug addict, hippie from California in Nashville, Tennessee, with long hair, hoop earrings, and flip-flops. And the reason that I got that job and the reason I was able to get promoted so fast wasn't because I was smarter than other people. I didn't have connections. I didn't have any degrees. It was because I aggressively shared my weaknesses and I looked for people to help me get better. Whereas in corporate America, a lot of people are hiding their weaknesses. Well, I was going to meetings at night being told that if I don't share my weaknesses, I'll freaking die. So it wasn't that hard for me to do it at work. And so the people that I mentored became my employee, that mentored me became my employees. Again, not because I'm special, but because I applied my recovery and my work So then I left that career at the height of the recession to co-found a startup. We were the first online scheduling company for healthcare. At the time, you could schedule an appointment for your car, your cat, or your hair, but you couldn't do it for your health. So we built the first online scheduling company for healthcare. We built it into an E500 company. It got acquired by a public company, which was an amazing, amazing experience, especially as a recovering addict. And then I led a nonprofit for 3 years. And then I did my TED Talk and released my book. And now I just go around the world sharing this message. And so I wanted to give people that context. And you should know, if you're listening and you're me, I hate listing any of that stuff because the enemy of happiness is ego, right? Like, I know that. So the reason that I list those things off is not because I'm special. It's testimony to what the 12 steps can do in anyone's life. If this drug addict can do this stuff, anyone can do it. So let's talk about why the 12 steps are so amazing. I always try to go over this when I work with a sponsee or someone, because I always felt like people would talk about the 12 steps in a disconnected way. They would tell me, oh, they would really be passionate about step 3, and they talk about step 3, or they'd be really passionate about step 8 or 9. And for me, what I really am able to appreciate, and when I work with my sponsees, is it is the best behavior modification system in the history of man. Like, we as addicts have an incredible privilege and opportunity that most people don't get, to learn how to actually integrate a system that teaches us how to lead ourselves better than most of the leaders of companies and governments in the world. So let's talk about the steps and how they work together. Step 1, admit that I'm powerless and my life is unmanageable. So the first 3 steps, right? Admit I'm powerless, my life is unmanageable, came to believe in a power greater than myself, turn my will and my life over to the care of a God that I understood. Those 3 things are basically, I can't, something bigger than me can, and I think I'll let it. Those to me are the basis of this whole program, right? It's about surrender. And it didn't take a lot for me when I was in rehab to be humbled, right? And like, I'm like, I don't need anything to like, really, like, your best thinking got you here, dude. Like, you're in treatment. Do you realize you're in treatment and you have nothing and you've been throwing up blood? Like, you're not doing so hot. So the first 3 steps are really about me letting go. Step 4 gets a bad rap. People are like, oh my God, I have to do an inventory and it's so long, or it's so hard. I have to look back at all this stuff. Dude, you know what step 4 is? Step 4 is getting all of the data of our life and putting it on the table. It's looking back at all the things, good and bad, that we've done and that we've experienced. And it's all data. It's all these little puzzle pieces that are our life. And in that puzzle, there is a secret to how we can completely change who we are. When I got clean, I was not organized. I was not professional. I was not honest. I was not responsible. I was not in shape. I was a terrible boyfriend. Like you name it, and I sucked. And yet I put like 1,000 puzzle pieces on the table when I did my 4th step. And in there was something that changed my life. So step 4 for me is you do an inventory so you can get all the puzzle pieces of your life. And so there are things like, I'm sure a lot of us can relate to. I would have a girlfriend and I would we'd break up and I'd be like, oh my God, she sucked. And then I would get into another relationship and tell all my friends why she was so different and so much better than the last girlfriend. And then it would blow up. And then I look back and it's like, there'd be like 4 or 5 different relationships, but they all sucked, man. They all sucked. Same thing with, the geographical cure. I'll stop using if I move to LA. Like, who the F thinks they're going to move to Los Angeles and use less drugs? Like, I was living on Venice Beach. Like, that is not a very sound strategy. So it's, you have all these experiences, and in that you go over it with a sponsor. I went over it with a sponsor. I'm doing my 5th step. And in working with a sponsor, what I learned was there are trends in all of this data. In all of these puzzle pieces, it's not 1,000 things that I need to worry about. There's like 5 to 10 things in here that I have to worry about, that if I just focus on those 5 or 10 things, my entire life can be different. And those 5 or 10 things are character defects. And so steps 6 and 7 are about identifying character. Well, let's just talk about 6. It's about identifying character defects. And so my character defect of, let's say fear of trying to control outcomes, well, that drove a lot of my pain. My character defect of procrastination is the reason that I couldn't keep a job. Like, there were defects that become exponentially impactful because the defect of lying meant that I put myself in corner. It meant I sabotaged every single relationship I was in. It was hard for me to be gainfully employed, and I hated myself. It's one defect, but there were like 100 instances where that defect hurt me. So step 6 is about identifying the defects in all that data, and that makes it a lot more digestible. It's like, okay, there's 5 or 10 things that I need to work on. Step 7 is learning how to surrender and give those up to my higher power, right? That is something that a lot of people don't understand and is really hard. It doesn't mean I do it once. It means that if I have a spiritual connection with my higher power, when I'm intentional working a process of recovery, I can have a defect removed just for today. And so for me, the power of taking the overwhelming nature of my entire past and why do I do the things I do and why do my life suck and all this stuff, we're not talking about the drugs anymore. We're talking about 5 to 10 character defects that if I can just work on those 5 to 10 character defects, I will be a completely different human being, which has been true. I'm a completely different human being. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a serial entrepreneur, like you name it. And more importantly, I can fall asleep, look at myself in the mirror, and not hate myself, even though I'm getting old and my beard is graying. And I'm a father, and I can actually be present, and people trust me and love me, and I love them. And I do the right thing, even when I want something that's different. So all that stuff is great, but it's all pretty academic. You go through steps 1 through 7. Where the rubber hits the road in steps 8 and 9, my experience. Because step 8, you go, okay, these 5 to 10 character defects, who did they hurt? And you start making a list of all the people that they hurt, all the people we need to make amends to. And then we work with a sponsor, we figure out who we actually need to make amends to. And step 9, we make those amends. And when we look at when we actually understand our character defects, and we look our character defects in the mirror, which is what we're doing when we make an amends, it becomes super clear that we don't ever want to do that again. All the people I stole money from, it's one thing when I was stealing, when I realized like, okay, one of my character defects is stealing. When I had to go make restitution to everybody I stole from, it's like, I don't ever want to do this again. So that's steps 1 through 9. It takes us from, I can't do it, steps 1 through 3, to what's all the data of my life that hopefully will eventually explain how I change it in steps 4 and 5. What are the 5 to 10 character defects in 6 and 7? And how do I look them in the mirror and really seal in that I don't want to live that way? And that's steps 8 and 9. Then I get to live fresh. And so steps 10, 11, and 12 are all about maintaining that transformation. And so, specifically, step 10, doing a daily inventory, is really just doing all the stuff I described on a daily basis with a couple of questions that I ask myself. It's like takes 2 minutes, but I get to keep all the changes that I made. A lot of addicts will work the steps and then they start backsliding in these character defects and they wonder why. It's if they're not working a 10th and 11th step, that's why. In my experience, I did not start working a 10th and 11th step until I had 10 years clean. And the amount of transformation that I've had in the last almost 9 years versus the first 10 years is way more. Because the 10 step, I got to work on my character defects every day. Just asking myself a couple of questions, did I live in that character defect? Did I connect with my recovery program? That kind of thing. And then if you go back to the character defects, because that's the exponential thing. The character defects, it says, God takes them from us. Well, that's why we need step 11, because step 11 is all about maintaining our spiritual connection with a higher power through prayer and meditation. And so step 10 is, can I be aware of everything that's going on by asking myself questions? Step 11 is, can I have daily? Step 10 is daily awareness. Step 11 is daily connection. If I have those two things, I get to keep all the work I did through 1 through 9, and I get to be like a totally different person, start applying it to all kinds of new things like being a father, being a leader, whatever. If I don't do 10 and 11, I probably backslide quite a bit. And then step 12 is practice these principles in all our affairs. And that's about bringing this to other people. But you know what? Like the founders of the 12-step program, they knew we weren't perfect because it says practice these principles in all our affairs, but they know we won't do that. That's why we have a 10th step. We get to clean it up when we don't. But the point is that it's not just, hey, let's get clean and work some steps. It's these steps work together as a system that transforms humans no matter what their situation is. No matter what your situation is, it doesn't just get you clean or sober. It completely transforms who you are. And so the reason I started off with all the leadership stuff is the number one characteristic that people associate with great leaders is authenticity. And that's why, like, I go around and I teach leaders what I call rigorous authenticity. Because if you do what I just described, and you look yourself in the mirror and you do all that work, you can't help but be authentic. And so what I want anyone listening to think of, so I talked about my success and all that stuff, which I hate talking about. And I talked about like the 12 steps, but this is the testimony. Right now, there are companies and leaders all around the world trying to figure out how they build authentic leaders and how they build authentic products and attract authentic employees. Everybody's talking about authenticity. Nobody knows how to do it. There's literally no one that has said, here's a step-by-step system on how to be authentic. Here's a step-by-step system on how to be an authentic leader. The only class of people in the world that have a PhD in a system for how to be rigorously authentic are recovering addicts. So if you work this program to save your life, you are giving yourself something that I believe is more valuable than a Harvard MBA when it comes to the professional world. And I mean, dude, so like, not to like, just to talk about the power of the impact, I get hired by companies like Google and Dell and startups and nonprofits, and they want me to teach them everything that I learned for a crappy cup of coffee and a couple meetings a night. So like, you want the secret sauce. So like, you know, and one of the reasons I carry this message is addicts want to get stuff. Well, you know what? Like, I'm not saying that getting clean is about becoming successful professionally, but we all get clean or sober, and then we have to go work a job. And what I'm saying is, if you apply these steps to that part of your life, you will have a skill set that most people don't, even if they have a fancy training or a fancy degree, and you will become more successful. And so I want this to be testimony to not that you will be successful in the world in spite of your addiction. You will be successful in the world because of your recovery. So I don't know if there's anything. I mean, that was a lot of preaching right there. So maybe if you have any questions, I mean, for the group or Justin, I'll go there. I know this is a little bit different than last time, but like, I'll say one more thing before we open to questions. The reason that I surrender my anonymity is because being an addict is the most important thing that anyone can know about me. And a lot of times, you know, people will say, oh, well, that's because, you know, you're willing to talk about being an addict and like, you're not scared of it being bad. I'm like, no, it's literally the best thing about me. And so I was hired to do a speaking engagement. I think I told the story last time too. I was hired to do a speaking engagement for a nonprofit that helps addicts, actually. And I told them that the title of my talk was Great Leaders Live Like Drug Addicts. And one of the leaders of the nonprofit called me up and they said, hey, could you change the title? And I was like, what's wrong with the title? And they said, well, drug addict has a very negative stigma associated with it. So could you change it to people in recovery? And I was like, no, I'm a freaking drug addict. And the only reason it has a negative stigma is because we keep focusing on the addicts that are in active addiction, but I'm in recovery. This is perpetuating that stigma. Being an addict is not bad. Being an addict in active addiction means I probably suck as a human. But being an addict in recovery means you want me to come talk to your audience. So if you want to like go help your people and go against the stigma, and she was like trying to understand. I was like, look, if I deny the fact that I'm a drug addict, I lose sight of the fact that I will be an addict until the day I die. But every day I get to choose whether I'm in recovery or active addiction. But I told her, I said, I want to make this really clear to you that it's not something that I consider to be a stigma that I've overcome. When I get up in the morning and I do my prayers, I thank God for my addiction before I ever start thanking him for my recovery. If they could give me a pill that would undo me being an addict, so I didn't have to go to meetings and I wouldn't take it. This is the best thing about me because, see, I have a benefit that most people don't. That if you're listening and you're new in recovery, you might not think is a benefit. My benefit is really simple. I walk around every day with a loaded gun pointed at my head that says that if I don't practice these principles in all my affairs, I will freaking die. And you know what? That gives me just enough motivation and excuse to be vigilant in working a program. And that program makes me of service to people in my life, outside of my life, being able to look in the mirror, like the guy that I see, have a connection with a higher power, know how to be present with my daughter, or know how to call myself out when I'm not. Like, that is a gift. And just to continue, since I'm a leadership coach, most of the leaders of this world do not have that incentive to practice rigorous authenticity, surrender the outcome, and do uncomfortable work. But we do. We have that incentive. Also, they don't know where to go to get trained. We know where to go. It's free for us. You just got to be willing to say, I'm Mike and I'm an addict, and show up for an hour and drink a crappy cup of coffee. Like, that's all. Maybe put $1 in the basket. That's all we have to freaking do, dude. So to me, it's the best thing about me. And so they let me keep that title once I explained it. I'm not sure that they were thrilled. I don't think they fully understood. But I truly think that, you know, for me, this is what I always tell. This is how I close my speaking engagements. I always tell people that I believe that there's a great leader living inside of each and every one of you. But if you want the world to see it, you're going to have to do what drug addicts do. And they always like stand up and start applauding. And I think it's pretty cool that what we do to recover is something that leaders are applauding as a process. And I'm just honored to be able to carry that message. So I'm done talking, Justin. Well, I mean, not done talking, done free flowing.
Awesome, Michael. Dude, you rocked it there. And the thing that you closed out with about owning and admitting that being an addict is like the best thing in my life. I think that is part of the miracle that people say, hey, don't give up before the miracle happens. I think that's part of the miracle of I own that I'm an addict, and now my higher power can make me an instrument in his hands to help others see that. And I think that's part of the miracle. And I want to share a personal story before we jump into the Q&A. It'll just take a minute. A couple of weeks ago, I was asked to speak and share a little bit of my own story and experience, strength, and hope with a church group of men and young men. And that's how I started it. And I didn't plan to start it out, but I said, hey, there is one part about me that paints every single thing I do in my life. And it's something that previously I was ashamed of, but now I am grateful for. And that is that I am an addict. And when that came out of my mouth, it was like another load of weight coming off my shoulder, you know, and it's just another miracle. Thank you so much, Michael, for doing those things. We've got several questions that have come in. I've written down several, so we will get to those questions right now. One of our audience members asks the first one. His name is also Justin. Welcome, Justin. What advice would you have for someone about starting to work his step 4 while struggling to see any good in myself? So he's just starting to work his step 4 and he's not seeing any good. How would one go about dealing with that?
Man, so I totally relate and understand. I think the key for me was making sure that as I was working on it and things came up that I felt really crappy about, my inclination as an addict is to isolate. And I think that's, you know, something that most of us do when we're trying to protect ourselves. And so that shame would come up and I would want to isolate. So I would want to turn to TV, to food, to whatever, to avoiding. And I think the key is to share it. The key is to share it with your sponsor. My sponsees, I always tell them that they need a big three for anyone that's a basketball fan out there. There's like, all these stories of these NBA superstars where three of them would come together and build a team into a championship team. And so I always tell them, I say, you need a big three. Your sponsor's one, and then you need two other people that have 5 years or more clean that are working a program. You can have as many friends as you want that are your peers, but you got to have three people that you call on a regular basis that have significant more time than you. And so I would say, if you're struggling with this, like, addicts, when we call each other, my general observation and my experience is we all deal with some level of social anxiety. We're not sure what to say. Like, oh my God, I'm calling you, I'm annoying you, I don't know what to say. And so if we just get down to, I'm having trouble working the program, all of us can relate to it. All of us that have been down the path are passionate about sharing it with the people behind us. And so I would say find two people, turn this like struggle that you're having into an opportunity to build an incredible foundation for your recovery, and talk to your sponsor about the parts that are making you feel crappy. You don't have to wait until you're done with the step to go over it with them. Unless they explicitly said that, in which case that's weird. And then find two other people that have 5 years or more that have worked the 12 steps, and call them and tell them one of the things that's really bumming you out that you're learning about yourself in the 4-step. Pain shared is pain lessened. And what they will be able to provide for you is what we call in my fellowship, the hope shot. And they will be able to give you some light at the end of the tunnel, hope on what going through that pain will look like. Also, I just urge you, like, a 4-step is not just the negative. There are sections in there where we're supposed to go through the positive too. And so make sure you're paying attention to that. And then the last thing I would say is, it's okay that you feel crappy. We did a lot of crappy things, but you should feel damn proud that you're doing something about it. And you're going through the process right now, but the person that comes out the other side won't be that person. So if you don't like what you see, that's more motivation to keep going.
Awesome. Thanks for that hope shot. That was awesome. All right. Another question that came in from our live audience from Therese, and this is very similar to a question I was going to ask you. So I'm going to combine the two questions. Therese asks, what step question do you ask yourself every day? And when do you do a 10th step? And my question was, would you be willing to do a practice 10th step with us? One that you could, walk through how you do it yourself every day that just takes a couple minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm happy to. And Therese, thank you for the question. So what I will say, okay. First of all, in my fellowship, there's like a little pamphlet for what we do in a 10 step. And there's like 30 questions. And so for me, and this is just my experience, I'm not saying what other people should do. My first 10 years clean, I was trying to do those 30 questions. And I actually had a reminder on my phone to do my 10 step. And so for like 528 days straight, instead of doing my 10 step, I just deleted a reminder on my phone that said to do my 10 step. And so I was like, okay, making it digital isn't working. Trying to do these 30 questions isn't working. I was at dinner with one of my best friends in recovery, Toby. And we were talking about how, I think I had 12 years at the time, I had like 9 or 10 years at the time, and he had 12 years at the time. And we were saying how we don't do a 10 step. So I was like, dude, you know what? What if I just like made it really simple and I made it physical? So what I did was I took like 3 questions that I really liked that I thought were going to help me with things that I needed to work on. And I typed them up on a Word document, printed them out, and I taped the 3 questions to my mirror over the sink where I brushed my teeth. Because I don't like just sitting there brushing my teeth. It's like I need to be distracted for those 3 minutes or whatever. And I was like, I need to, instead of trying to make this something that I do, I need to integrate it into something that I already do. And instead of trying to do all 30 questions, I need to just start with like, they told me one day at a time, man. Why can't I start with one question at a time, right? So I don't remember what those first 3 questions were. I'm fairly certain that one of them was, did you connect with someone in recovery today? And that was really helpful because it was a question that was written out and I would just answer them in my head while I'm brushing my teeth. And it wasn't about, judging myself for not doing it. It was just about creating awareness. And actually now we understand one of the reasons a 10 step is so powerful is psychologists will tell you that the only thing necessary to change behavior is awareness. But if we don't go through a 10-step, we lose awareness of our character defects, and therefore we can't do stuff. So this led to me getting really jiggy with the 10-step. And so I just pulled up, thanks to Teresa's question, one of the ones that I had, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, 12, 15, 17. It's 18 questions. And it literally I added a question like every couple months as I started to identify something that I needed to do that was different. So I'd be happy to share them with you. But what I would say is, and I could like read them off real quick, but what I would say is start with 2 to 3 questions around things that you know you need to be doing. So for me, one of the questions was, did I meditate today? Like that was a big one. And so like I would do it when I was brushing my teeth at night. That's when I would do my 10-step at the end of the day. And so did I meditate today? Another one was, did I seek and choose God's will instead of my own? Did I connect with someone in my 12-step fellowship today? And those are some of the questions around my recovery. But then what I started to do is realize, wow, this is really effective actually. Because what I noticed was I might not meditate 10 days in a row, but on day 11, I'd be like, you know what? I'd answer that question and be like, man, I wish I did meditate. I can't believe I'm saying that. All right, maybe I will do it this week. So do you want me, Justin, you want me to read off the questions I had?
No, I think those are some good examples. If you want, you can share them with me. And if the listening audience would like, they can send me an email and I can send them off to them at that point. And I do love the question. And it sounds like most of them are yes or no questions. So it's a real quick yes or a real quick no. Now, if you come across a no question, do you go and make that right now? Or do you just say, you know what, tomorrow I need to focus on this? Or how do you approach that?
Well, so good question. So one of the things that happened was I started to add questions that weren't necessarily 12-step related because there were practical things that I need to get better at. So one was prioritizing my wife's love language is quality time. And quality time is not my love language. So I have to be really intentional in prioritizing my wife in terms of time. And so what I noticed was I wasn't doing that. So I have a question like, did I prioritize E? Her name is Elizabeth. And so asking the question would help me keep my awareness. But B, if I answered no, I might be inspired afterwards to be like, okay, let me look at my calendar and make sure I spend some time with her. For me, these questions were not, in the 10-step, there's when we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. I just do that out of reflex. That's not even on here. It's just I've learned over time, if I've been wrong, I'll admit it. But in answering these questions, sometimes I would realize that I was wrong. So for another one that's really embarrassing is, I became the CEO of a company and I'm trying to balance being a servant leader with owning my unique perspective. And so I had a question on here that said, did I practice arrogance? And inevitably, if I answer that question, yes, I would almost always know an employee that I had been disrespectful. I'm not disrespectful, but I'd been arrogant around, or maybe been, spoke down to them unnecessarily. And so amends that I needed to make would come out of this exercise. But to me, the goal was to ask the questions and have awareness, not necessarily make sure I go do all the other things, because then it becomes too big. But I would usually naturally be inspired to be like, okay, let me go make that right. Or sometimes it'd be like, okay, you know what? So what's another one? Did I welcome interruptions from the most important people in my life? Because most important people in my life would interrupt me and I'd be like, decline the call. I'm in the middle of something. And I'd be like, okay, I just need to be aware of this going forward. I wouldn't go back and be like, hey, sorry, I declined your call or whatever. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I love that last one there. I sometimes get annoyed when I'm, working, doing something quote unquote important, and one of the most important people in my life, like my daughter or my wife, come in. Sometimes I'm like, let me be. But that's such a powerful thing to look at. What's more important? numbers on my computer screen or the person that walks in the door behind me. I have to thank you for bringing that to my attention there. All right, I've got another question for you, and this is related to step 7. Actually, well, step 7, step 3. It's related to surrender. What is do you have a step-by-step process of surrender? Like when one of your character defects it rears its ugly head. Is there a step-by-step process you do, or is it different each time? How does that work for you?
Is that a layup? Do you know that I have a step-by-step process?
No, I don't, but
okay.
I'm asking. Yeah.
So let's go back to the 3 principles that I teach leaders. So practice rigorous authenticity, surrender the outcome, do uncomfortable work. Most people know they want to be authentic and they're like, yeah, I should do uncomfortable work. But most leaders don't know how to surrender the outcome. Because most humans don't. Like, we are really bad at surrender. So whether it's, I'm sitting here and I've got a family member who's in active addiction and I really want them to get clean, whether it's I've got a significant other and I wish they acted a certain way. But like, as a country in the US, we all went through a surrender the outcome moment where we had a presidential election, and despite your political, affiliation, after you cast your vote, you've got no control, but people wasted so much time and energy watching the news, debating, gossiping about everything that was going on, trying to control it. And so surrendering the outcome is essentially one of the most important tools that I learned in recovery. And so when I was teaching leaders how to do it, they were like completely baffled. They would be talking about an executive that they reported to that sucks, and they couldn't stop talking about how much they suck. And I'd be like, okay, what can you do about it? And then they'd be like, well, they really suck. They need a change. And I'm like, there's no difference between this and being in a meeting and hearing someone talk about their significant other or their friend that's in active addiction. And so what we created was a process where, we have 2 different tools. The first one is the simplest one in the world. It's take a piece of paper, and it's really important that you actually do this on paper, because there was actually a study for a Harvard MBA graduating class. They asked the group, how many of you have specific goals that you have written down? And only 15% did, that they were actually written down. And how many of you have goals? And 85% of them had goals for their lives. The 15% that wrote it down out-earned, not that money's everything, the other 85% in total. And they're all Harvard graduates. And so the biggest difference was they had them written down. So writing's big in 12 steps. This is a big part of the process. So you take a piece of paper and you write can't control in the top left and can control in the top right, and you put a line down the middle. And so in the can't control, what you do is you name specific who and what combinations that you can't control. So who is it that you can't control? Is it I can't control my boss and that they ask me to do overtime. I can't control that my wife micromanages my kids. I can't control that we're in the middle of a pandemic and money's tight. There's a lot of things that you can write, so what we do is I teach people, write 3 or 4 things about something that you can't control. And so I'll just give you an example. So when I would do public speaking, my book goes into how I believe that everybody's addicted to wearing a mask, not just drug addicts. But I was really scared of what people would think. And so the outcome that I was worried about was they would think that I'm a kook, and that they would rate my speech as terrible, and I wouldn't get booked for more speeches, and my whole business would fall apart. And so what I was doing was I was backing off of talking about mask addiction. So I did one of these sheets. So what I can't control that I believe that leaders suffer from mask addiction. I can't control how the audience members perceive it. I can't control that some of the people will reject it or make fun of me. I can't control the ratings that I will get, right? So it's listing multiple things that I can't control. And then it's what can I control? Specific who and what. I can control that I clearly and confidently articulate what I believe. I can control if I focus on carrying the message to the person that will believe in it. I can control whether I censor myself. I can control whether I prepare and do everything else well in the presentation. And so in the process that I teach, when people start listing all the things that they can't control and all the things that they can control, it gets a lot clearer. And then what we have them do. So that's step one. Step two is look through the can't control column, read each one, and circle the one that you think is going to give you the most emotional relief. And so for me in this example, I can't control what the audience thinks was the one that I would circle that would give me the most emotional relief. And then go to the can control column. Which one will practically make you more successful? And so for me, I can control if I prepare and do my actual presentation instead of backing off of it, right? I can control that. That will practically make me more successful. And so I have people cross off all the other things that they can't control and all the other things that they can control and just focus on the thing that they can't control, the one thing that they can't control that gives them an emotional lift, and the one thing that they can control that will make them more successful. And one of the reasons we have people do this in this process in this way is by the time you're done with this exercise, your mind is completely like a dog unclenching from like being locked on someone's leg. Your mind has redirected all of its energy and focus into the thing that you can't control. And then you just focus on that. And that's where uncomfortable work happens.
Man, I'm glad you shared that. I did not know that. I know that I'd spoken with you and met with you a couple times, but that was something that hadn't remained in my memory. And that will be something I will be doing probably today. So very good.
I've got a sheet. Remind me, I'll send you a link to it and then you can like post it on whatever, but I've got a sheet that walks people through it.
That'd be amazing. Thank you. All right. So before we close up here, Michael, do you have any final words of wisdom for us?
I will say this. I've shared a lot about the things that I've learned and things that I've done, but one of the most important things that I learned in recovery early on was no matter how much time you have clean, nobody has it all figured out and nobody's working a perfect program. So I got to share all these great things about me, but like, man, I still struggle. You know, I'm struggling. You know, I lost my sponsor and my best friend in recovery, earlier this year. And between that and some other things and moving in the pandemic and trying to get re-engaged, I'm currently having to rebuild my recovery network to some extent versus what I had before the pandemic hit. And that, has been a struggle because it requires a level of time and investment that I had taken for granted. I'd done all this building for my network. I had my home group, I had my service commitments, I had everything. And I've had to do some rebuilding, get a new sponsor, and do a number of new things. And it takes effort and all that kind of stuff. And so one of the best things I learned in early recovery was someone told me about this guy that got 12 years clean, and he stopped sharing about the things that he was struggling with. And he stopped working the program, and he would just like try to help other addicts, but he stopped doing the thing himself, and he relapsed. And then he got clean again, got another 12 years, did the same thing, and relapsed again. And so what the old timers told me was pay attention to the people that stay clean because they keep doing what got them here. They still have struggles. They still need to work the program. Addiction doesn't go away. And so like, I am very grateful for the experiences that I have and that people want to hear about them. But like, I am still just an addict that is, working his program imperfectly, that has struggles. I struggle with being present with my children. I struggle with saying no at work. I struggle with prioritizing time to talk to people in recovery. I've gone through stretches where I'm doing a lot of travel where I've gotten out of my habit of meditation. And so, whoever you are, like wherever you are in your journey, this journey doesn't really end, and it's not really about a destination. It's just about staying on the path. So, the last chapter in my book, I'll end with this. The first time I wrote my book, I was writing it to impress people without knowing it. And so I wanted the last chapter to be, I climbed the mountain and I'm really successful and I have, and I don't have this, but like, and if you do what I'm doing, you can get a Ferrari or a Tesla and all that kind of stuff. And I sat down with my wife one day and I said, I hate my freaking book. She said, why? I said, because I'm wearing a mask, man. I'm trying to impress people. I want to end this book with the year that I stopped doing everything that I preach and my life fell apart. She's like, well, why don't you do that? I'm like, okay. And so the last chapter of my book is called A Tale of Two Divorces, and it almost never made the book. And it's about the year that I had to divorce my wife, my first wife, my business partner, and sell the company that I love and get fired as CEO, all in the same year. And that was a very humbling experience. And I stopped practicing rigorous authenticity. I stopped surrendering the outcome. I stopped doing uncomfortable work. But at the same time, I wanted to put that in the book because I don't think anyone ever recovers. I don't think we recover from, fully from our addictions, and we can just choose whether we're in active addiction or recovery. And so today I'm Mike, I'm an addict, and I choose to be in recovery. That's all I got.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was awesome. That was a great RECO12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If we didn't get to your question, or if you have other questions, please go to RECO12.com/forum and join in our community and ask those questions and answer others' questions that will come up. I invite the audience to come back next week. If you've not yet gone to RECO12.com and submitted your email address, please get on the invitation list so you can join us live each Friday at noon Central Time. And Mike brought up several things, and I'm going to have him email me over those questions and the worksheet so that if anybody wants that, send an email to RECO12pod at gmail.com. That's RECO12POD, RECO12pod at gmail.com, and I'll get that sent over to you. Let's see. Next week, we'll be hearing from Tamar O, whose topic will be How I Got the Life I Never Knew I Was Missing. Now, let's launch off into the rest of our day with the serenity prayer that Mike has requested, and I will be the voice in this. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, not mine, be done. Amen. Keep coming back, everybody. It works if you work it. So work it. You are worth it. Mike, that was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, dude.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight, still searching for glimmers of light, feet still on the ground. I can still be found, standing still.
My wings are torn and tattered, but I know I still can fly. I may not soar unfettered, I may not rise too high.
Recorded in the book of life and bind it with the seal